comfortable like this, sorry. Have to be comfortable. Good afternoon. It is Friday. It's the 20th of May 2022, and I'm reading out of Life in Spirits. It is written by Harry Edwards, who was known throughout the world as a foremost spiritual healer and the author of many books on healing. And he has here contemplated what the spirit world might really be like. This is the story of John and Mary. Any John, any Mary, brother and sister, husband and wife, sweethearts, friends. The story of you and me, but with a difference. John and Mary have died and have entered into their new life in spirit. I'm now at chapter 15, and it's entitled Visit to a Concert and a Library. Our two friends were deeply impressed with the picture the master had portrayed to them. They were discussing the different ways they could render service and were happy at the prospect there was so much for them to contemplate and do. Mary interrupted their conversation, saying, "Wait a moment, I've just heard there is to be a concert. Let us stop thinking about ourselves and go to the concert." And so it was, they found themselves part of a great throng of people proceeding towards a circular formation of hills. It appears that all which was necessary to call an audience together was for the master to broadcast an information message by thought radio, which could be heard as Mary had heard it. John confessed he had no special love for music, but this was not so with Mary, which possibly accounted for Mary having received the broadcast information and not John. So they concluded this was the reason the message were turned to reach just those people possessed of a measure of musical appreciation. Arriving at the site of the concert, they saw in the center a large amphitheater. In the center was an open space clear of people. There were no seats, for why should there be? People in spirit cannot get physically tired, so the audience was content to stand. People were arriving from different directions, thousands upon thousands, taking up their positions on the rising ground from the concert floor upwards to the surrounding hills. John wondered if those who were so far away would be able to hear. Mary assured him that they would, for she had heard concert at this place before, when she was distantly placed. She thought some people preferred to listen from a distance, so that they could not be aware of the preparations for the concert and the pressure of so large a concourse of listening people. As they watched, they saw the entry of the musicians and the other people who were to entertain them. There were some 500 musicians carrying instruments of various kinds, and an equal number of others wearing many hued-colored raiments. John also drew Mary's attention to some other pieces of equipment which were placed around the orchestra. A number of instruments were similar to those used in Earthlife, instruments of the string family, violins, violas, cellos, and others of much larger size, similar to the double bass. There were harps and a combination of harp instrument with a resonant cello body. Other instruments in various sizes looked like advanced models, large and small, of the simple triangle and made of different types of metals, some possessing a horn-like attachment. There was a section of xylophones of various lengths, some with horn attachment, bells and other objects, which John had no idea what they were for. "Look," John said, "why are there no trumpets, cornets, flutes, piccolos, and all the other brass instruments, trombones, and the like?" Mary smiled, for she knew that John would have the answer after a moment's thought. Then she said, "All those instruments you are thinking of need an intelligent application of a physical flow of force, such as gas or air, which is the chemical state we do not have here. But," she continued, "if you look in the center of the orchestra, you will see an instrument you have not seen before. You may not see the one who plays it, for he is within it." John then noticed a strange structure. It was taller than a man and as wide again in width. The nearest thing which John could liken it to was a tower with a broad base and a narrowing towards the tip, when two arm-like tentacles emerged from the sides. At the end of the tentacle was a silvery mass of slender, stamen-like stalks, which in turn had scores upon scores of very fine, gossamer-like hairs. John thought to himself they looked like overgrown dandelion blooms, waiting for someone to come along and blow them. John learned from Mary there could only be one of these musicians in an orchestra, and the succession of the concert largely depended upon his superior progression in the understanding, compositions, and presentation of music, so that others in all grades of the art of musical appreciation could listen and feel within themselves the beauty and meaning of the culture of melodies, and the members of the orchestra should of course know all about this. John was ready to ask further questions as Mary touched the his arm and whispered, "Listen." From the central piece there came a cadence of sound the like of which John had never heard before. There are no words in the dictionaries to describe a new concept of sound any more than there are words to describe an entirely new color. The nature of the music would change as if it were from a church organ to the light bubbling notes of a waterfall, from the subtlest sounds to those of grandeur and magnificence. It became clear the rest of the orchestra was to create a background of music to support the master musicians responsible for the central themes. John and Mary, like all the others in the great assembly, were held entranced with the melodies. He later said it seemed as if the musicians were playing to him and for him alone, as if a strong personal affinity held them close, very close, to each other. Mary said she had felt this too, so it can well be assumed that each of that vast concourse of people also felt the same personal oneness with the music. John learned later on there was no set program, and there had been no rehearsal with the principal musicians and the orchestra. This master of music was indeed a master, and it was through his dual-thought ability not only to receive and compose the high quality of music which would be readily appreciated by lovers of and non-lovers of music, as John thought himself to be, and soundly his knowledge how to transfer his music to the point where they could be translated into energy structures and thus radiate out to reach all the people who came to hear. The tower-like structure was simply a vehicle for receiving the master's melody through concepts and translate them into characterized energies, which could be radiated in a qualitative form which the people in spirit life could receive and register as a mental experience. All the instrumentalists in the orchestra were musicians of note, who not only possessed the gift of attunement with the master, but had some pre-knowledge of his intentions, for, as has been said, there had been no rehearsals, and the master's music was the spontaneous creation of his mind at the time of its issue, and the members of the orchestra knew the character of melody, so that a pure blending could follow without any discord. Was it just a coincidence that when John felt as if his head was bursting with glorious sounds to the point where he felt he was unable to accept further music, that he saw a change in the amphitheatre was about to take place? Several hundred people dressed in many-hued garments were taking up positions on the open space in front of the orchestra. As they moved, so it could be seen that their robing was of extremely fine texture, almost gossamer-like, and with different shades of colors underneath. The orchestra, led by the master, commenced to play a lilting melody, and the dancers moved in perfect rhythmic synchronization. At first these movements were gentle, undulating movements of the bodies and limbs. As the tempo of the music increased, so the dancers changed their formations and their movements became faster, seeming to be a continuous movement presenting a spectacle of colour that no words are adequate to describe. As the dancers swirled around and the very fine gossamer-like material of their raiment moved in perfect unison with the melodies, the spectacle presented music in motion and colour. The movements of the dancers quickened and then gently merged into another rhythmic theme, slower and restfully portraying ease and peaceful leisure, only to gradually imperceptibly become faster and still faster. It looked then to John as if all the dancers became as one, and from the indescribable centre of colour, flying forms emerged. The dancers were levitated from the central mass of movement, weaving in and out of each other, patterning the space above the colourful throng in a pattern of moving lines, rising, falling outwards and inwards, all in unison, maintaining the perfection of the overall pattern. As this increased, attracting, as it were, more and more dancers from the ground, so the total dancing assembly was elevated into the space above. Perhaps it was that, as the dancers were no longer limited by the need to keep their feet upon the ground, they entered into a new dimension of movement, and this was fully exploited as the lovely mass of moving colours interpreted the message of the music in rhythmic freedom and unrestrained movement, uniting the orchestra and dancing into the spirit of life. With a gentle slowing down of the melody, so did the dancing, with the dancers descending to the ground, and as the last note died away in the distant hills, so they swayed to a standstill in their original formation. Music and dancing continued on and on. At one time, so infectious was the music and movement of the dancers, the whole of the vast audience was moved to join in, with body movements, unison clapping and singing of the musical theme, for not only were the instrumentalists and the dancers exalted by the life and spirit of the music, raising them upwards from the amphitheatre to the summits of the surrounding hills, but the massed thousands of the audience were carried with it too. Intensely happy and uplifted, John and Mary interrupted their journey homewards to visit some gardens, where the gardeners were devoted to the development of a new species of spirit flowers, whose beauty, colour and scent cannot be written down in words, so ethereal were they. Nearby was an opalescent building of grandeur, the architectural shapes and materials of which presented a warm radiance of refined pastel shades of palest green. The material the walls were made of looked transparent, and the eye could look within it, but not through it. They found this was a library, and they went inside. The walls and high vaulted ceiling gave off the same opalescent radiance, creating an atmosphere of peace and isolation from external interests, holding, as it were, the thoughts and wisdom expressed in all the books within. As far as the eye could see, in the great central hall and down along the avenues which led off from the centre, were rows upon rows of books, glistening with their quality bindings, cheerful and bright, but there were the more subdued tones as well. They were welcomed by one of the librarians, and they sat down in a small hall, in a small half-circular seat, so that each one was facing the other. The librarian was a lady of pleasing personality, but as our friends looked at her, they could not fail to be aware of her possessing within herself a great store of knowledge. They had not been speaking together very long before she was told of the future services they hoped to render as outlined in their interview with the master. The librarian bid them wait for her, and she rose and left John and Mary to the memories of the celestial magic of the concert and the present wonderment of the library. The librarian returned with 2 books, one slim and the other substantial in bulk. She said, "I've brought you these to take away and read when you will. The slim volume will give you, in not too many words, the message which was given to the masters, by a messenger from the Lord Creator at the early time when the evolvement of the human soul consciousness began. And it is from these directives values in this spirit life had their inception and developed as we gain knowledge and experience in promoting a proper code of values in accordance with a divine purpose. This book sets out the pathway through which man has progressed in both the intellectual as well as his spiritual awareness of the purpose of his creation. She added, "I will not tell you more of this to be your reference book. I will not tell you more, for this is to be your reference book and for your encouragement in times when you may be feeling too small to continue." This second and larger book will give you guidance and information in your forthcoming endeavors to establish a personal relationship with people who are in their earthly life. These are the good people and those who are not so good, the healers and the mediums, those who desire to develop the gift of the Spirit, others who are mentally sick needing guidance, the fearful and the obsessed, the lonely and the bereaved, and many, many others, even to the rulers who at times are in urgent need, for they have the greatest responsibility to the human family and thereby the goodwill of each one to all. The information in the first part of this book will assist you in the understanding of the processes you will be shown in the art of establishing communication with Earth people. Both books are simply written, and with your desiring minds to know how to take your part, you will soon understand that which the chapters have for you. You can read of the experiences of others entering into the same field of service as you will be. You can learn from their misunderstandings. There are the narratives describing the procedures and the results of continual care and attention being devoted to bringing even one bewildered or harassed soul into the heaven of good spirit guide life. Of heaven of good spirit life. Keep these books as you desire, and when you have no further use for them, I shall receive them back. All my good wishes to go with you. When John and Mary reached their home, they took a closer look at the books. The beautiful feeling of the paper, the substance of the covers, of which they had no knowledge and had never seen before, the craftsmanship in the tooling and binding that made them feel it was not just a book they held in their hands, but part of their life which had gone into its production. John, who had always loved books, stayed on, holding first one and then the other, absorbed by their excellence, and broke off his concentration by the apt comment to Mary, "What a glorious thought it is that there can be no paperbacks in this new life of ours." That was chapter 15, and I shall read next chapter 16, which is entitled Preparation for Communication. Have a good Friday. Bye-bye.